Good morning, students. Today we are going to start the second chapter of class 10, the history. The name of the chapter is Growth of Nationalism. In the previous video, the third video of the first chapter, we discussed about the consequences of the first war of Indian independence. One of the main consequence, one of the main results of the first war of Indian independence was the rise of nationalism. This chapter is going to be completed in two videos. In the first video, in this video, we are going to study about what is nationalism and what are the factors leading to the growth of nationalism. The second video will be consisting of the precursors of Indian National Congress and the establishment of Indian National Congress. Here, like the previous video, after the introduction, the points will be explained in detail in a PowerPoint presentation. That PowerPoint presentation will be attached to this video. Now let us start with what is nationalism. Nationalism is a patriotic feeling of love towards one's own country. This feeling of patriotism emerges among a group of people who are living in a particular territory, who are having the same historical and cultural background. Among the Indians, the modern feeling of nationalism was absent till the 19th century because till the British conquest of India, India was divided into a number of small independent kingdoms where the people never had the feeling of oneness and their loyalty was towards their rulers. But in the 18th century, when the British conquered India, they gave a type of oneness, and a reaction to the British gave the feeling of nationalism among the minds of the Indians. In the textbook, in the first part of this second chapter, there are four major factors, there are four major causes led to the growth of nationalism. The first one is the first cause for first factor leading to the growth of nationalism was economic exploitation. Many factors were there, but the most important factor which caused for the emergence of the feeling of nationalism was economic exploitation by the British. Due to the economic exploitation by the British, all sections of the Indian society, like peasants, the artisans and craftsmen, the professionals and working class people, suffered too much. This suffering and economic exploitation of the British was the first reason for the emergence of nationalism among the minds of the Indians. The second one is repressive colonial policies. Some of the policies introduced by the British in India, some of the acts passed by the viceroys and British Parliament for India were repressive. The repressive colonial policies like Vernacular Press Act, Arms Act, etc. were against the basic freedoms of the Indians. Along with this, the Ilbert Bill controversy was another repressive colonial policy introduced by the British which caused for the emergence of the feeling of nationalism. The third factor which caused for the emergence of nationalism was socio-religious reform movement. In the 19th century, so many social reformers emerged in India. Some of them were Western educated Indians and others were The enlightened Indians, the socio-religious reformers were Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Dayanand Saraswati, Jyotiba Phule, etc. In the textbook, only the names of two social reformers were given. They were Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Jyotiba Phule. These social reformers worked for the upliftment of the downtrodden sections of the society, and they worked for removing the social evils prevalent in the Indian society. The last factor which caused for the emergence of the feeling of nationalism was a role of the press. By the second half of the 19th century, so many newspapers started its publication in India. Some of the prominent newspapers were the Tribune, the Hindu, the Times of India, etc. Through these newspapers, through the press, the repressive policies of the British were exposed. People came to know about what is happening in different part of India and different part of the world. And along with this, through these newspapers, the nationalist leaders could give messages to the people living in different parts of the country. So these four factors resulted in the emergence of the feeling of nationalism. These points are explained well in the PowerPoint presentation. The next part of this video is the PowerPoint presentation. Now we can move to that PowerPoint presentation. Growth of nationalism. Nationalism refers to the feeling of oneness and common consciousness that emerges when people living in a common territory share the same historical, political, and cultural background, have the same cultural values, and consider themselves as one nation. The factors leading to the growth of nationalism. There are four major factors which led to the growth of nationalism. They are: the first one, economic exploitation; the second, repressive colonial policies; third, socio-religious reform movements; and fourth, role of the press. Now let's see each of these points in detail. The first one is economic exploitation. All sections of the Indian society, especially the peasants, artisans and craftsmen, the working class people, and the educated Indians were subjected to the economic exploitation of the British. The first section of the society was the peasants. The peasants were the main victims of the British colonial policies because they were subjected to pay huge amount as land tax and other taxes. The second section was artisans and craftsmen. The British economic policies crippled the artisans and craftsmen as they were devoid of their source of livelihood. The third section was the working class. Here working class means the people who are working in the factories. The working class people were exploited by the factory owners who were generally Englishmen. The fourth section was the educated Indians. The only employment available to the educated Indian was government service, in which competition was high and the chances of promotion were bleak. The second factor are repressive colonial policies. Many of the policies introduced by the British government, especially some viceroys serving in India, were totally repressive. The first one, Lord Lytton organized a grand Delhi Darbar in 1877 to proclaim Queen Victoria as the Empress of India. Lakhs of rupees were spent when India was at the grip of a severe famine. Second, Lord Lytton introduced Vernacular Press Act, which forbade vernacular papers to publish any material that might excite feelings of dissatisfaction against the British government. Third one, the maximum age limit for the Indian civil service examination was reduced from 21 to 19 years. That is why many Indians were not able to attend the civil service examination. The fourth one is the import duties on British textiles were removed, which proved harmful for the Indian industries. The next factor is socio-religious reform movements. The socio-religious reform movements of the 19th century were great pioneers of Indian nationalism. The reformers felt that the path to progress lay in the acceptance of the best of East and West. They worked for the abolition of caste system, child marriage, dowry system, parda system, and infanticide. The prominent social reformers were Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Jyotiba Phule, Dayanand Saraswati, and Swami Vivekanand. Now we have to study in detail about two social reformers, Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Jyotiba Phule. The first is about Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Raja Ram Mohan Roy was known as the father of Indian Renaissance. In the year 1809, he wrote a book named Gift to Monotheists. In 1828, he founded the Brahma Sabha, which was later renamed as Brahma Samaj. He was against the rigidity of the caste system, condemned polygamy, discouraged child marriages, and advocated the right of widows to remarry. It was due to his efforts Lord William Bentinck passed a law in 1829 making the practice of sati illegal and punishable by law. The next social reformer is Jyotiba Phule. Jyotiba Phule was a social reformer from the downtrodden section of the society. He worked for the upliftment of women and education of untouchables. He founded the Satyashodak Samaj in 1873 with the aim of securing social justice to the weaker sections of the society. His famous books are Gulamgiri and Sarvajanik Satya Dharma Pustak. The contributions of socio-religious reformers. Swami Dayanand and Swami Vivekanand proclaimed the superiority of Indian culture and civilization. Second point, the reformers condemned untouchability and caste system. Third, the reformers taught people not to ignore the importance of women who could participate in the national movement. Last point, they protested against the British domination of India. The fourth factor which led to the growth of nationalism was the role of the press. The newspapers helped in developing nationalism in the following ways. First, it was through the press the message of patriotism and modern liberal ideas like equality, liberty, fraternity, justice, etc. spread among the people. Second, the press carried on daily criticism of the unjust policies of the British government in India. Third, it made possible exchange of news among different social groups from different parts of the country. The last point, it made Indians aware of what was happening in the world. The prominent newspapers were Amar Brasar Patrika, the Bengali, the Tribune, the Pioneer, and the Times of India. The second part of this chapter will be uploaded in the next video soon. Thank you.